How are you enjoying the vineyard? Well, the weather's not that good, so you must be too. How can you tell? The weather is extra. Did you get it? The weather is extra. This is the vineyard. Thank you, Dennis. Sun doesn't matter. It's the partnership, the family, the community, right? My name is Richard Taylor, and I work with Karen Holmes Ward. Karen, she really runs the place. I'm the front man. And we represent the Union Chapel Educational Cultural Institute. And when we got started, we started thinking about our very dear friend, Professor Charles Ogletree, my law school classmate, civil rights advocate, attorney, academician, just a great guy. We lost him too early to dementia. And so we wanted to just recognize him in these forums, the public forums, are named after him. Thank you. His wife Pamela will be here actually this weekend. It's an honor this evening to welcome you to Hope in High Water, a people's recovery 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. World premiere in conversation with Lejeune Montgomery Tebron and Tremaine Lee. Let's give them a hand, please. They're coming up later, but wanted to recognize them. It's an honor to gather with you here at the chapel in a space dedicated to truth, justice, and community. What I like to say is the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, but it doesn't bend automatically. You with me? So panels like this, discussions like this is our fourth for the season. We have, I think, three more coming. They're really intended to have good conversation. Excited about this presentation. Everybody was heartbroken over the tragedies down in Katrina. We have with us Rhea Williams Bishop, serves as Director of Mississippi New Orleans Program for the Kellogg Foundation. And we really are delighted to have the Kellogg Foundation with us. This is their first year, and we hope to see them back. A native of Mississippi, a champion of children, families, and communities across the South. Rhea has spent her career advancing equity through education, economic opportunity, and community-led solutions. Please join me in welcoming Rhea. Rhea, come on up, please. As she's coming up, I want to bring to your attention two marvelous books that are being sold in the rear by Cousin Rose. 1,000 Ways to Die, The True Cost of Violence on Black Life in America by Tremaine Lee, and How We Heal, Lejeune Montgomery Tebron. So don't forget to pick those up on your way out. Thanks so much. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all for your warm welcome. Good afternoon. Hey, y'all, to bring some of Mississippi to you. He has told you I am Rhea Williams Bishop. I direct the programming for the foundation in Mississippi and New Orleans, and a proud fifth-generation Mississippian who is very privileged to be here. I consider New Orleans my second home, and so thank you all for having us, and thank you for being here as we gather just a few weeks ahead of the 20th anniversary and the commemoration of Hurricane Katrina. Now, for us, this was a moment that totally reshaped lives, systems, and really how we come to understand crisis and recovery in America. This is a time to remember, reflect, and recommit. And more than anything else, this evening is about honoring the people who didn't wait for change. They became the change. Katrina exposed all sorts of fault lines of inequity and the deep systemic harms that many communities had long endured. But it also revealed something else, the power already within communities to imagine, to lead, and to heal. So this evening is not only about what was lost, it's about what endures and what is being currently built and continuing to be built. You'll hear from two extraordinary leaders who understand this very deeply. Our own W.K. Kellogg Foundation's president and CEO, Lejeune Montgomery Tebron, and Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Tremaine Lee. So we'll start with a segment from the new documentary, Hope in High Water, A People's Recovery 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. And then we'll move into a moderated conversation about community leadership, about storytelling, and the long game of change. So let's take a look at the clip, and then I'll be right back.
This is the
Come back
simplest
up.
version of the poem.
Thank you.
I still have air in my lungs, so I need to make use of everything.
It feels like Katrina was yesterday, and then sometimes it feels like it was a dream of another life.
Katrina runs like a long movie in my brain.
I take deep breaths because I come from a people who know how to come back, so I will start again.
Even though I'm like 27 now, I was like 7 when it happened. Convention center packed. I just remember it like being like shoulder to shoulder, people like shoving each other.
We lived in the hotel for a year because something without lungs blew the city into a wound.
Katrina was the first time my family ever evacuated. When I saw the water rising at Circle Food Store, which was about 5 blocks from my house, that's when I knew there was something quite beyond expectation or even imagination that was happening in my city.
My city, as mean as a bride mistaken for a widow. My city, always loved because it was a home made of instruments.
You know, it's wild to imagine that 20 years ago, I was just a cub reporter in this city for the Times-Picayune. And I was a police reporter, and I got to know the city, and I got to know the people and the neighborhoods. In those early days when I didn't have any contact to the outside world, no cell phone service, no computers, no laptops, no social media, the only thing I knew to do is keep telling the story. And so to come back to this city time and again, to help amplify the voices of those with the truth, who know the story, who've survived so much, it's an honor and a privilege. There's still problems in the city. There's still holes that need to be filled, right? It hasn't scarred over, let alone totally healed. But even with that, there are people here who are committed to doing the hard work, the work of patching an American city back together.
I happen to serve a community that lives 25 to 30 years less than the white members of the same community.
In order to have a healthy community, we have to have a peaceful community.
20 years later, there is hope.
There's always hope. I think New Orleans is the proof of that.
In New Orleans, how you live and die often depends on which neighborhood you grow up in or which zip code you're born into. And it starts when a woman is pregnant with her baby. And from there, life in New Orleans is challenged every step of the way. It's the water that you drink, the air that you breathe, the way the system guides you from a classroom to a prison cell. All of those factors are leading Louisiana to having the lowest life expectancy rate in the country and a massive gap between black and white, many years. And so here in this community, folks are stepping up to save lives every way they can.
Yes. Thank you. Come on, Drew. Come on, baby. That way. Hold on, let me
They
help.
don't have no blue ones, so.
Thank you. I got pregnant with my first son, and it was surprising and it was scary because I had morning sickness the entire time, but it was intense. Like I wasn't even keeping water down. Going to the doctor, it felt very dismissive. Like they were like, "Oh well, it's morning sickness. You'll get over it." All right, here you go, Jack. Thank you. Yep. Right. That was like life-changing for me because I'm like encountering the health system where I'm like at my most vulnerable, and like it took for me to lose 50 pounds and like just kind of beg and plead and tell them like it's not getting better.
So what the research tells us is that many of the reasons that women of color have worse outcomes in pregnancy and birth are bias, inherent bias in the health system, racism, structural racism issues. We don't listen to women of color when they come to us with a legitimate concern about their own health. It's a little hard to interpret some of the data around what happened after Katrina because so many people left the state, and it was the largest internal mass migration in the country. Over 1 million people were disseminated out of the state. Maternal child health was not in a great state before Katrina, and it's still in a place where we're in the lower part of the country.
The people of New Orleans are rooted in the kind of soil that's both fertile and forlorn, but where the joy of birth has always been shadowed by the struggle to survive it. I can feel that spirit in the words of people like Kimberly Novad, whose work honors both the joy and heartbreak of Black motherhood.
We are, happen to be in one of the states with the largest prematurity birth rate, and as a result of that, a very high infant mortality rate. New Orleans is the same. Our prematurity birth rate is over 13%.
Wow, that's a big number. 13. That sounds huge.
This is a really big number, and something that I struggle with. So, I came to my work with Saul's Light because my son was born premature, and he died as a result of that prematurity. And for me, it was such a, I would say, debilitating experience for me, right? I didn't know up from down. My kid is a part of that 13%. I thought, well, somebody's got to do something about that.
What does the work look like for Saul's Light? What do you actually do?
Our work is about delivering direct services to people. So the biggest thing that we do is make sure that mental health services are available to families at no cost to them. And so what that means is that people who have walked the journey before reach back.
In an instant, I saw your face and I knew that your existence was a blessing, divine lesson, and I was ready to learn.
A bat and a chicken, a lamb, a lamb. After losing 50 pounds, and they finally started giving me nausea medication. I was far along enough for them start checking me, and then I was already 4 centimeters dilated, so I was at risk of having him early just because I was going through all that straining for months straight.
Hey, you found him.
One of our goals with the program here, Nurse Midwifery Program, is to graduate more midwives of color. We have lots of studies that show if you are a patient and you're cared for by someone who looks like you, who speaks the same language that you can identify with, that the health outcomes are better for those patients.
The precarity of bringing healthy life into the world of post-Katrina Louisiana is one thing, but keeping that life healthy is another. And oftentimes, the line between sickness and health comes down to a simple set of numbers, your zip code. So where are we right now? What town are we in?
So you're in Elkinsville, Freetown.
Okay.
Yes, we're about 20 miles to the west of New Orleans. In 1880, it was settled by freed men and women of color.
Today, Elkinsville sits in an over 80-mile stretch between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, where there's so much big industry and so much sickness that it has earned the ominous nickname, Cancer Alley.
People are getting sick, people are dying. My mom passed away due to complications of Parkinson's. It is known that some of these chemicals cause neurological issues. Well, I had a cousin who asked me, she said, Kim, do you think that we lost our babies because of these chemical plants around us? I didn't know for sure, but I never forgot that question. You can see the tanks right over here. I never forgot that question.
If the threat of toxic air and water was choking folks before Katrina, the decades since have seen it suffocating them.
You are dealing with, certain pollutants that are known carcinogens. We know the effects that they have on people, and we know that the effects go beyond the person being exposed and can be transferred into, a fetus in the case of a lot of pregnant women and a lot of low birth weight, preterm birth.
How did Hurricane Katrina and the flood that followed exacerbate the issues we saw in terms of how the environment was impacting people's health?
I think what people might not realize is that in the wake of those disasters, it's a free-for-all. The air monitoring stations aren't operational. It always takes a long time for them to come back on. So I think Katrina was like this national spotlight, but the pattern has continued and will continue until something's done about it.
Kimbrell is trying to do just that. After years of quiet advocacy, she launched Refined Community Empowerment, Inc. to help protect her neighbors from the impacts of pollution and chemicals while fighting for environmental justice and health and housing equity. So some of your readings, you did a test of this air right here. What'd you find?
Yes. Oh, I found benzene, toluene, the hexanes and heptanes, and many more.
None of that sounds healthy. It all sounds terrible.
It's not healthy. They're not healthy. Benzene is a known carcinogen. Benzene was in my home.
Show me how you test. Looks like you to be an environmental scientist and a mechanical engineer.
Unfortunately, yes. But I'm just a resident, trying to breathe clean air and keep myself and my family safeguarded.
So this is sucking the air in?
You hear it?
Yeah. So the point is just to fill this thing up, you capture it, and then you'll send it off and they'll analyze what's inside?
Yes.
What's it like escaping something trying to kill you? A minister blames this on the slaughter of unborn children. My father suggests we find a copy of the Green Book and pray over it. A car full of black people driving past Confederate statues. The president tries to separate himself from responsibility, but we see him too. Put those back. You're not wearing hand-me-down underwear. I eat lifted grapes. You call it stealing, adults call it building credit. Don't you know I don't know where we are? What to do in a country that never wanted me here? Did you hear the one about God?
For the faithful, the hope of better days is like oxygen. It fills and sustains them. But even hope sometimes struggles to breathe in a city where last breaths come too often, too violently, and too young. Mr. Ernest Johnson and Ubuntu Village serve as peace ambassadors in one of the most gun-weary cities in America, where murders fell in the years after Katrina, but where youth violence has remained stubborn. So this is like headquarters, this is the home base where everyone descends from?
Yes, this is where everyone descends from. It's, we call it the lab. This is where we create prescriptions. Everyone becomes the medicine to the cure we are trying to do, and that's to end violence, whether it's from a prevention or intervention component. When you talk about untreated trauma, untreated root causes that develop violence, of course, we're still experiencing it, right? Because when it happened, we were all in the rush to regain our, material things that we had lost and memorizing those who we had lost. So we didn't treat the trauma, we didn't treat the underlying issues and root causes of what came out of Katrina.
Mr. Johnson reminded me of an African proverb. It goes, "A child that's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." It's as much a warning as it is a mandate. How you doing, brother?
How you doing? Danny,
how you feeling?
I'm good.
All
Feeling
right.
great, brother. How you doing, man?
All right, so where we at right now?
We in Central City, B.W. Cooper Housing Project, Calio Project, where I was born and raised at.
What does that work actually look like? When you're out here in the streets, what does it actually look like?
We out in the community, combating mediations, conflict resolutions, de-escalations, right? We also have a partnership with UMC Medical Center, which is our level 1 trauma center. Anytime somebody gets shot from the ages of 16 to 26, they dispatch us, the community team, give us a call. I dispatch someone to the hospital to be at the bedside of the individual, make sure retaliation and things of that nature don't take place.
This ain't just like charity work for you. You're from the community, right?
Yes, yeah. I caused a lot of havoc in the community, right? So I want to right my wrongs, you know what I'm saying? I want to be, I once was a part of the problem, so I want to be a part of the solution, you know what I'm saying?
A 25-year life expectancy gap sounds insane to me.
I raised 5 black children in this city, and so I consider it a mandate because my children deserve to live just as long as a child from Lakeview, as a child from the Garden District, or anywhere else in this city.
And what is that approach, and what role does community play in shrinking that gap?
We did what we call a health impact assessment that showed us that even with expanded access to insurance, people didn't feel like they deserved proper health care. But in Ashe Cultural Arts Center, where I am now, we created this program called I Deserve It. This program that would train artists and culture bearers as community health workers, give them full-time employment as such, build in their community art practice, and then put them out in community and see what happens.
Do you believe y'all are saving lives through the arts? Like the arts saving the lives, that 25-year gap?
Absolutely. In the first 6 months of our program, we increased the connections to primary care providers in New Orleans East Hospital that we were operating out of.
20 years later, what's been the progress made?
Some neighborhoods have been rebuilt, yet other neighborhoods have been totally abandoned. Some people have been able to return home and build, while many others are still in what we call the New Orleans diaspora. So we have to be real about why a second line feels so good on Sunday, because Monday morning you're dealing with some real soul-sucking stuff.
Every single day it still feels like the wound's not healed just yet.
No, that I know. It feels like we moved on, but you move on with a limp.
It's hard to wrap my mind around the depth of the wound Katrina left in New Orleans. But what I can feel in every fiber and hear in the voices of those still fighting to keep this city alive is what the flood could never drown. The spirit of a people tested time and again, battered but never broken. And in that spirit might just be the blueprint for healing. Despite the high water, they found hope.
So, what a powerful first look at the documentary. I think team members have watched it a couple of times. Every time I watch it, I get a little choked up because it takes us right back to that moment in time. So we are here to discuss it with 2 wonderful leaders whose vision and partnership helped to bring about this documentary, Hope in High Water, to life. And then their work continues to shape the movement for equity, justice, and community-led transformation. And we're excited about that. And I want to tell you a little bit more about them. So LaJune is the president and CEO of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, headquartered in Battle Creek, Michigan. She's a first 2 times. She's the first woman and the first African-American to lead the foundation since its founding in 1930. She deserves a hand for that. Under LaJune's leadership, we have advanced a bold vision rooted in racial equity, racial healing, and the belief that the community is the driver of lasting change. Lejeune has stewarded some of the foundation's most significant commitments and investments, including a generational investment in New Orleans and in Mississippi, and we're very proud of that, ensuring that our children, our families, and our communities have what they need to thrive. So thank you, Lejeune. So joining Lejeune is Tremaine Lee, Pulitzer Prize and Emmy Award-winning journalist, and now the filmmaker of Hope in High Water. An MSNBC contributor, he has spent the last 2 decades reporting on the collision of race, power, politics, and violence. And time again, he's returned to New Orleans, and we're so happy that he does, to gauge Hurricane Katrina's enduring impact on Black communities in the Gulf South. So he was there from the very beginning as a reporter, and we are glad that he is doing this film. So together, these two bring forth a powerful perspective, 2 different perspectives, one that's rooted in deep place-based investment and community partnership, and the other in truth-telling and narrative change. Hope in High Water is not just a reflection on what happened after Katrina, but I feel that it's more importantly, it's a meditation on what is being built since then and what is still possible for these communities. Tonight, we will explore what it means to move from disaster to dignity, from recovery to reimagination, and how both the storytelling and sustained investment plays a great role in shaping that journey. So let's begin. So Tremaine, so as I watched the clip, I thought back to where I was in August of 2005. Where were you and what were you feeling and experiencing in that moment? And how was your role? How did it look then? And then how did Katrina shape your worldview moving forward?
First of all, thank you for the question, but also thank all of you. As they say, you could be any number of places, but you're here with us, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you all for joining us. You know, watching this video and this film brings me back to when I was just a cub reporter. I didn't have no gray in my beard. I had a little fresh goatee. Couldn't tell me anything. And I felt like I was mission-driven, telling these stories. But to be back in New Orleans, again, walking those same footsteps that I did 20 years ago, it's amazing how much has changed and how much has not changed. When I first landed in New Orleans, it was about 3 months before Katrina. I moved from Philly down there, and I was just getting my feet under me as a police reporter. And so I was in all the neighborhoods, Central City, the Lower Ninth Ward. I was everywhere, trying to humanize the story of the way we experience these systems. And I wouldn't have described it that way then. Then I was just trying to tell these stories and make sure that the last glimpses often of people's lives were captured humanely. But then Katrina struck. And it not only upended the universe of New Orleans, it upended my own personal, professional universe. I was challenged in ways that I don't think I could have never imagined being challenged. Those early days, so many years later, it's hard to remember the people who were dying in attics, the elders who were dying without their medication, the young people trapped, away from their families, and trying to tell that story when 80% of the city was underwater. And so in those early days, I went into New Orleans as a reporter, a young reporter, and I came out a journalist. I started to understand the systems at play and the cogs at play. I was able to put language to it, and I was able to more fully tell the story. And so those early lessons from Katrina stuck with me. But it's also, despite all of those losses and the weight against the people of New Orleans, there was always a beauty and a strength and a graciousness. It don't matter where you are in New Orleans, they're gonna offer you something, they calling you baby, and they trying to feed you, and it's like this beauty and this pride in that they are welcoming and loving and warm. And so to see that city almost torn asunder by the breaking of the levees, and also those broken systems, long before the levees broke, there were broken systems that created the most vulnerable populations. And I was, again, a young reporter with the Times-Picayune, and just everything changed when those levees broke for me.
So given when the hurricane hit in 2005, you were leading WKKF's internal response to that disaster. Tell us more about that moment and how it shaped your decisions and the foundation's long-term commitment to the Gulf South.
Yes, I wasn't even the president at that time. 20 years ago, I was probably the chief operating officer. And I remember immediately following those early days, the foundation coming together and determining how we might be of assistance in this moment. And we're not a disaster relief foundation. In fact, we like to make long-term systemic impact and contributions in communities, and we don't like to just show up for a crisis, drop money, and then leave and never come back. So we're very intentional about how we fund, but this was unique for us. We could see the systemic inequities as it was appearing before our eyes. And so we determined at the Kellogg Foundation that we were going to step in. And in a very short period of time, we identified about $27 million that we could send to New Orleans, our grantees there, the people who were on the ground, and we wanted to make sure that they had the resources they needed. Because when you saw what was unfolding, you could see the disparities, and we knew that those most in need probably would not have access to the resources they needed. So that was our immediate response, but because of our core values and the fact that we believe that people have the inherent capacity to improve their own lives, we knew we couldn't leave. So we named the city of New Orleans as one of our priority places, along with the state of Mississippi and the state of New Mexico and the state of Michigan. But New Orleans, we named the city. And we said we were going to stay for at least a generation to make sure that the children in New Orleans could thrive. Exactly, and I can tell you now as president, we never defined a generation. And in my time, I say, we leave when the children are well. So that's the work that we're doing today in New Orleans.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. And so we're going to pull that thread of storytelling a little bit further and talk about the power of storytelling. And it's not just to preserve memory, but to shift narratives and drive systems change. You'll hear us say systems change over and over again because that is very important. That's the heartbeat of both this film and WKKF's long-term commitment in the Gulf South. So Tremaine, in the documentary series, you center youth farmers, you center birth workers and immigrant first responders. So what new understanding of recovery came about and emerged from those conversations that you had with those folks on the ground and community?
So we were very intentional from the outset that we wanted to have a people-centered kind of approach to our storytelling. And in that storytelling, it's that the people have everything they need inside of them already to heal themselves. So when systems fail, when the money isn't delivered, when the promises of politicians fade into the ether, the people know what's best. And I think it wasn't necessarily revelatory necessarily, but I think their commitment to doing that was astounding in ways big and small. Those who have funding from folks like the Kellogg and those who do not have any funding and are feeding children every single day. And the innovative ways in which they're literally planting seeds for following generations by teaching young people to grow food themselves to feed their communities. I think that's the part that strikes me every time, is that even when our humanity is tested and pushed to the edge, we do find a way. And I think New Orleans was a great example of that in so many different ways, whether it's educating teachers on how to best serve Black children, whether, again, it's growing food, whether it's engaging with maternal health from the very beginning, but also fighting for the very land beneath their feet, not only from the encroachment of big industry and interest, but coastal erosion, right? To make sure there is a barrier for the next hurricane and some ground to soak up the next flood. I think that the many ways in which folks are fighting with and without resources was eye-opening.
It reminds me of the saying, making a way out of no way.
That's right. You make the road by walking.
That's right.
And folks in that community are
That's
making
right.
that road by walking.
That's right. So, Lejeune, Mr. Kellogg believed that lasting change came through cooperative planning, through intelligent study, and group action. How do you see storytelling and supporting a film like Hope and High Water as a part of that theory of change process?
Yeah, narrative, I think for us is part of that intelligent study, right? When we have this formula, we talk about cooperative planning, bringing people together, the study, the intelligent study, but that's just not research. That's just not academic. It's also the stories of the people on the ground. It's their insight, it's their brilliance and their innovation that is a part of that study. And I think narrative is the space and the reason that we align so much in our work, because we have the artist of story and we know that story is power. And when we come together and work to bring to life what was truly happening in New Orleans during this time, much different than what we could see in mainstream media, what we know is we begin to humanize the people of New Orleans and allow them to tell their story, which is the story where the insight comes from and the intelligence study that allows us to do better and be partners with them on the ground. So, I mean, our work is about improving the lives of children, but knowing that they live within the context of families and communities. And that community story and the narrative that you will continue to bring to life will allow us to continue to examine these systems that are not working for all children and families.
So we know Hurricane Katrina didn't happen in a vacuum. So it hit communities already shaped by generations and generations of disinvestment and systemic harm. We know that. And what it exposed was nothing new for us, but it was undeniable. Every time you turned on the TV and you saw folks suffering and struggling, it was right there in our faces, and we had to do something about it. And while the damage done was layered damage, so was the response, thank goodness. It was communities, the people that we just saw, not the systems that stepped up first to take care of the communities and the children and families. So let's talk a little bit about healing, not as an endpoint, but as a daily practice that makes long-term change possible in not only New Orleans and Mississippi, but all across the nation. So Tremaine, many of the people you interviewed carry and hold personal and collective trauma. The gentleman that spoke about that trauma, he said, we don't acknowledge it. And this is not just trauma from Katrina, but from all these generations of systems harm. What did it mean for you to return to the Gulf South and ask people to share their stories about grief and pride and survival? We know those were tough issues.
Yeah.
So how did you get them to open up to you and talk about that?
You know, it's always hard because oftentimes you're meeting people at their lowest moment. Yeah. And when it comes to Katrina, there's been 20 years of very low moments. In scraping to make some progress, but reminded by the heft and force of these systems that keep people bound up. When the levees are rebuilt and the homes are rebuilt, but there are still children who are hungry in New Orleans. When the schools are opened again, but the violence that they experience, not just in community violence from folks being coiled up, but the systemic violence and the actual violence of police and the carceral system. The idea that families are separated through incarceration. And so long before there's a flood of water, there's a flood of these other kinds of social ills. And so to go back there, you have to be very careful, but I'm coming with my whole open, honest self. If anything, I'm myself every single time. And so I think that I hope that what they feel in our interaction is that I truly, truly care about the people and I care about my people. And so without being biased, my lens as a journalist just allows me that proximity to get close. But I think you have to handle these stories and communities very gently, right? Because they deserve as much. Because what happens sometimes in the media and with journalists is we'll parachute in, get our story, and it's about the headline and the front page story, and then we're out. That's not the way media is most humane or helpful or healthy for anyone, right? And so I think it was tough, but also there is this glimmer, and we talked earlier about this idea of hope. And sometimes it's a funny thing that I don't know how to feel about this idea of hope, because we're always expected to be so hopeful. In the face of whatever it is that this system pushes against us, we have to be hopeful, and we have to be hopeful. But it reminds me of the notion of resilience and resiliency. Around the 10th anniversary of Katrina, I was talking to a woman, and I was using that kind of language about the resilience of the community. For me, it meant like we standing strong despite it all. And she said, resiliency isn't a natural state. You bend and bend and bend until what? Until we break. Or are we expected to bend and bend, and they say, well, those people are okay, they're used to it. And so it's always tricky, and I'm always wrestling, but there is hope, and I think hope isn't a pejorative. It isn't a backhanded compliment like resiliency. I think hope means that there is a steadfast belief in something more, right? And sometimes that hope is within us to create something more. So it's always tough, and it was tough in this case in particular, because the progress hasn't been made that a lot of folks hoped and expected, but the people are making that road by walking it, and I think that gives me hopes. Remind me of what we're made of.
Correct, yeah. And so, Lejeune, hope is a theme in your book. How We Heal, A Journey Toward Truth, Racial Healing, and Community Transformation from the inside out. I love that part of it. You have to start within. You chart and share your deeply personal story and your professional path toward racial healing. And this book is rooted in empathy, it's rooted in truth-telling, it's rooted in community transformation. And so in this moment, what does healing look like in practice? And why is it that we have to have it at the center of any effort to create lasting change?
Yeah, so just to provide some context, for us, racial equity is a space where anyone would achieve their outcomes or their desires without being judged by the color of their skin. So their outward appearance won't determine their dreams and their opportunities. We know that that isn't always the case. We've seen the structures that hold people back. And so healing, we believe, is the process by which you achieve racial equity. And you achieve that by bringing people together who have not connected across differences. And as people come together and connect with people that they may not know or understand, what we believe is it develops empathy. It allows someone to have an empathetic feeling for someone else's outcomes or circumstances. Without connection, people can't conjure up the empathy that's needed to understand a situation like Katrina. And if you remember at the time, we were watching narratives of looting, people looting and stealing bread. That's the only understanding some may have of this entire crisis. But if you know the people, if you connect with the people, you have a different understanding and a different way of helping and being a part of the recovery effort. And so healing is that real hard work that people think is fluffy, but it's the truth work around truth-telling and connecting with another person very deeply in a way where then you may have empathy, you may understand, you may even be a part of the transformation. And so part of our journey in working in New Orleans is we had to heal. And we wanted to be helpful, right? And we went in and we listened. And you know what they told us? Because we were saying, we want to help the children, we want to help the families, we want to help jobs, health, food. They said, you have to work on mental health. If you're not going to start with trauma, we'll never get to thinking about early education or the other things that of course matter, but you have to start with us where we are. And we changed our entire approach to funding by learning and working with the people of New Orleans. And trauma became the entree point for how we connected with people and how we then supported them moving forward. That was healing. It was healing for us, it was healing for them. And today, healing looks like sitting down and having a deep conversation with someone where you may be crosswise with in the moment. But instead of blaming or shaming their perspective and backing away, you lean in and you ask, why do you feel that way? What is there that you want to share that I may not understand? What is your truth of your journey that may be different than my truth? And then you don't judge and say, because it's not what I would have expected, it's not correct. You sit and you hold in a place that there may be two truths. But in doing that, you come to a place where you can understand a different perspective, but you also can see commonality. And through the commonality in our human experience, we can then become one that has empathy and can help in the moment of need. So that is the work of healing, and we need it in this nation now more than ever. And part of healing is storytelling, is being able to tell your true story of who you are and where you're from. And again, I think that connection of the power of narrative and storytelling is at the heart of how we are going to build a nation, a democratic nation where all people can thrive.
And it's starting with self first.
Absolutely.
And then working with others. So Tremaine, in your book, 1,000 Ways to Die, The True Cost of Violence on Black Life in America, it's due out next month, but I think some of y'all have already gotten your books. Yeah. It will, especially, that's right.
It doesn't come out until
first.
tonight.
You're
So
getting
the very
ahead of
first time.
You're ahead of the release.
Yes.
And look, she's in the back waving them.
Yep.
So after we're done, you can go back there and get your book. But you lay bare the devastating toll of gun violence, systemic racism, and you also address generational trauma, which goes back to what LeJune just talked about. But at the same time, you lift up the beauty and the self-determination within Black communities. So how do you see healing taking shape in the wake of such deep harm? And how does what you cover in your book move us closer to reimagining and rebuilding the systems that perpetuate all these injustices?
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
That is a big question.
And first of all, in so many ways, I feel like my book and your book are kind of talking to each other.
Exactly.
This idea of healing.
Yeah.
And my book focuses, it's not just about gun violence, even though that's the vehicle here. There's the violence of the system that creates the ecosystem where such gun violence is ripe. But this book is also deeply personal for me. So there's a lot of reporting in this book about how guns move from legal to illegal, the great cost that we all pay and as communities pay. But in 2015, 10 years ago almost, I was writing a book about the true cost of gun violence in terms of actual dollars. And I was going to touch on some personal elements in my reporting, but it was mostly about the cost of gun violence that we all pay. Kind of cynically, you might not care about the young brother who shot on the south side of Chicago, but every time someone's shot and paralyzed, we're all paying that, right? Kind of cynical, but maybe you'll care this way. And then in 2017, I had a heart attack at 38 years old. No family history of early death, no high blood pressure, no cholesterol. Some soft plaque broke off, and a clot filled its place. And it was almost, I almost died. And my daughter at the time was 6 years old, and she was asking me, Daddy, what happened and how and why did you almost die? And to answer her honestly, I really had to engage with what was bearing down on my heart, which was a whole career filled with telling the stories of Black life, death, and survival, but also going back in my family line, back to Jim Crow, Georgia, where the first murder in my family sent my family north. An act of violence in a sundown town is why I exist. And so I grew up knowing about my grandfather's murder. which reshaped my family in pretty dramatic ways. But in trying to answer my daughter honestly, I had to go back and discovered others through the generations, and the burdens that we carry, and the psychic connections between guns and black people in this country, including the guns for slave cycle, where Europeans were plying African regional powers with guns to create war, to create more enslaved people. And so we were pushed out of Mother Africa with a gun at our back, and here we are at the hell of the Western world, and everything we were going to experience. And through freedom and nation building, more violence and more pushing, until we get to the migration, and we're in these northern cities, these so-called promised lands, right? And here we are bound by more racism with different accents, and a gun policy that allows these guns to flow into communities in much need, right? And so to tell that story, right, honestly, you have to engage with the real trauma that we're carrying, the real, as a community, but also as men and women. What it's like for mothers and grandmothers and their grandsons, a little knucklehead grandson, is outside and you see a car that looks like theirs on the news. Or what's it like to be a father of a daughter or a son in this community, right? And so I had to be honest with myself, and I had to do some healing. Part of the healing work for me was addressing what it really means to miss my grandfather in a way that it took me until writing this book to really grapple with the trauma that I inherited, let alone what my mother and aunts and uncles were dealing with, and how all of that can manifest in physical ways, right? And so this was truly my life's work. I hope at the end of this is a vehicle for conversations about blood clots and bullets and how both can shred a life. But also how, as black men in particular, how we're not sleeping, we're stressed out, we got the crosshairs on us from the system, from community, and what that means for us to push through, and the women who love us, the stress on them, right? Hopefully we can have these kind of conversations beyond just the violence of the trigger. There's the systemic violence, but also what it means to heal in ways that give us hope, that give us tangible ways to breathe, right? To find ways to nurture and pour into the young ones behind us. So I am honored that this is the place where these are the first time these books ever been touched air. These are brand new. So thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. And we could be here, the topic, we could be here all evening, but we're not. I've got two more questions, then we're gonna open it up to the audience. So this question is your last question, LeJune. As someone like me with deep roots in Mississippi, you know firsthand that the South is the birthplace of deep structural racism, as well as civil rights movement, but also the creativity and imagination that really holds the nation up. Whatever good comes out of Mississippi. But and what does it mean to invest in the South with both historical clarity, we've touched a lot on that, but also with future vision, and what are we building toward?
Yes, and you know, it was interesting. We were speaking earlier, we all have Southern roots. Some of us, because of our Southern roots, our families migrated north for opportunity. That would be my family, and why I was born in Detroit as opposed to Clarksdale, Mississippi, where my earlier siblings and my parents were from. Rhea, on the other hand, is also very Southern, and she remains Southern. But there's a story behind that. Her family stayed. Some families left. But the bottom line is there's a Southern spirit that's everywhere. And when you talk about why invest in the South, from our standpoint, the South is, first of all, it's a large population. People of color is the largest population and concentration of people of color in this nation. It's also a place where there's growing Latino populations, growing other populations. This is and also a place of innovation. And we talk about the arts and culture that reside in the South. And so as a person that wants to invest in community and to build community, the innovation and the spirit in the South is something that I think can be learned more broadly than just in the South. So those investments really, when you talk about return on investment, those investments feed the rest of the nation. And recently, I learned of there's a project happening in the South around living with water, which is about, how do we understand the context of scarcity in water, but yet build an urban plan that understands that respects that, and builds an ecosystem where we can live and we can understand how we preserve and care for an asset that is so critically important for us. Investing in that is going to invest in new understandings for not only the nation but the world. We're seeing water scarcity everywhere. But we know that innovation and the new understanding of this work is best conducted by those who are a part of that crisis. And that's why that work is so critical. And it's just an understanding that if you want to reach that level of depth and the populations that are on the ground doing this work, the South is a place of promise and can really lead us toward the future for our children.
So Tremaine, the last question for you. So for the audience, what is the one takeaway for them to walk out of here? What do you want them to take out when they walk out the door from Hope and High Water?
I think that we are our greatest asset. And to speak colloquial, ain't nothing wrong with us. Ain't nothing wrong with us. Our greatest strength is our communities. We know what's best for our communities. We just need the help and the resources. And that's why it's an honor and a privilege to work with the Kellogg Foundation, who cares so deeply and honestly and truly, mission-driven about helping communities heal themselves. We just need the resources. And so I think it's like we are our greatest asset.
Totally agree. Thank you for that. If you all help me in thanking our panelists, wonderful, wonderful job. Thank you. So now we'll open it up and let the audience become involved by asking questions. Yes.
A second and take some audience questions. I'd like to start with one, if you would. So I am a producer and reporter for the ABC TV station in Boston, and as journalists, we're trained to watch what happens, to turn it off, push it down, keep going, keep reporting. But I remember with Katrina, I remember getting home, sitting down, watching the 6:30 newscast, and watching the awful video, which I had seen 1,000 times throughout the day. But I just sat at my kitchen counter, and all of a sudden, I just started crying. It was just like a deep, guttural, I was just sobbing. And maybe, Tremaine, this is what you're talking about generational trauma. But I felt in that moment, there were many moments, but I felt again in that moment how our country has failed our community. Just that was the visual moment of disappointment. And I just would like to ask if we could turn that into a question. How has that impacted you, the three of you? Did this impact you in this way?
I know for me, I wouldn't have said it then, but I know now that I was traumatized from my experiences through Katrina. And I remember my own attitude being a little different. I was a little snappier. But also I learned, again, through the heart attack, that you can't just pack it here and pack it here and pack it here and pack it everywhere without breaking it down. You can't drink it out. You can't hang it out. You can't do any of these things that we use to mask this trauma and this pain. You have to address it. And I think especially as journalists who get this kind of repeated direct exposure and secondary exposure from this trauma, we have to have the tools and intentionality between breaking it down immediately. And that goes for all of us. When you recognize, why am I feeling like this? Why is my heart racing? I'm not sleeping. I'm tossing and turning. I'm being snappy with my kids or my friends. So I think that we have to be intentional about recognizing it. But it's not easy, especially for us.
For me, when I saw those videos all I saw was myself and my family. That could have been me. It could have been the people I know and love. And understanding that in my role now, I have a responsibility to ensure that all children thrive. And to see those innocent children stuck in a system that is not designed for their well-being, for me, it made me angry. And it makes me work harder. And for me, every day that I have the great fortune and privilege to lead an organization with a mission of serving children, it energizes me. I say hope is the fuel that leads to action. And for me, I'm constantly looking for how can we make these systems serve our people better.
My name is Howard Tate. I'm from Orlando, but also from Brooklyn, New York. And appreciate the conversation. But one, I would like to ask Mr. Lee if you could imagine, I work in media, I worked in all of the networks for the past 30 years, and to watch the collapse of media, Joy Reid being yanked off the channels, as we move into this fascist type of environment, how do we imagine to create systems of media, because now we're a visual society, that we can get funding from like Kellogg to create these systems and broadcast and tell our stories, because it's going to get shut down as we watch rapidly, but we need this type of outlet. What would be a great imagination, or what would you say, a business pitch, or to
Brother,
get
if
the
I
money?
knew, brother, we'd be doing this now. But no, I got you. No, I mean, to answer your question, I think even during the best of times, the if we're calling this a fascist time, the pre-fascist times, you know, working in media, as you know, often feels like it's the plantation, right? You have to walk in the big house and ask permission to tell the stories in the corner of the plantation, right? And you have to validate why this is a story. When you go back to the back of the plantation, and every time it rains, it's all muddy, and can't nobody get to work, and you're trying to convince the people in the big house that this is a real story. And then you go out there, and they're like, man, you in there in the house, how you know, right? But I think ultimately the answer to all of this, it's not just burning down the plantation, even though that's one thing. I think it's we have to build our own. We have to build our own. We have to build our own and tap in and plug into resources and organizations, thank you, who believe, it doesn't take a lot, it takes enough though, right? But I think that's the issue, because we see a lot of organizations and institutions and businesses preemptively bowing, preemptively falling. We need people to stand up and believe in our humanity enough, in our stories, right? And our lived experiences enough to make that happen. We have to build our own, because even during the best of times, and I've been in newspaper newsrooms, I've been in broadcast newsrooms, and even in the best ones who are good at what they do, it's still this system, right? That we have to go asking for permission to tell these stories. And sometimes the gatekeepers there don't have any good sense at all, right? Let alone cultural intuition. And so I think we need to find partners to help us, you know, build our own. That's the only way. That's the only way, I think.
We have a gentleman here who has a question. Tell us your name and where you're from, sir.
My name is Dylan, and I'm from New York and Scarsdale, Westchester. How long do people live in the Cancer Valley?
How long did the people live in
How long do people live in the Cancer Valley?
First of all, it's amazing to see you, young man. Seriously, it gives me,
thank you.
I feel like I can see a journalist in you. I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. That's a great question. I don't have the exact number, but the life expectancy rate is much lower. There are neighborhoods in New Orleans and across the country where the gap is as big as 20 years. So if one person were to die, especially the racial, life expectancy gap. So in some places, a white man might die at 76, and a black man would be dying at 70. Sometimes it's much lower in places like Chicago and Philadelphia. Even in New York, it's a little slimmer, but it's still pretty big. And in Cancer Alley, you're talking about the water that you drink, the air that you breathe, and also the stress of existing in that kind of place also limits life expectancy. So I don't have the exact number for you, but there is a definite gap. And great question. Yeah. I got more?
And what is being done to fix the air?
Not much, honestly. Not much. There, even in that community, Elkinsville, that was founded in the Reconstruction era when black folks were just getting freedom. They founded that town. They have this long history. They've approved an ammonia plant in addition to all the other plants. And so the only recourse, citizens have is to keep fighting and petitioning and at least trying to push for policy change around how much they can emit and all kinds of technical stuff. But there's unfortunately not much. Not much.
And I'll add to that, one of the a very important project we've recently funded under our Racial Equity 2030 body of work is we funded an organization that's going into communities and teaching community members how to advocate for environmental justice. So they're teaching them the law, they're teaching them the rights that they have in this space, and how to approach their city government, the community leaders around issues like the water and other environmental, where the companies locate and the air and the pollution. So in one way, part of the answer is for all of us to stand up and advocate for the well-being that we know we need to thrive. And you can do that.
Yes.
You can do it as well.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
A true journalist, he was ready for one more. He was like,
Yeah.
I got one more.
Another question ready. I love it.
He's obviously going to be a journalist.
Yeah.
Without question. And I got you, man. If you need any insight, I
Yes.
got you. Seriously.
I wanted to just note, though, part of our streaming system here is from an African-American platform, Pixel, based in Atlanta. Rodney, where are you? His company does it, so talk to Rod. He can help you out. I have a question about how you're able to get the foundation to make such a deep, sustaining commitment. Most organizations want quick hits, maybe 2 years, 3 years. So to have you stand there and say that you all decided to do it through a generation without an endpoint is beyond impressive. Tell us how you were able to collect the power in your organization to make that kind of investment.
It goes back to our founder. Our founder was Will Keith Kellogg, who also founded the cereal company. And he gave his entire fortune to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And even then, in 1930, almost 100 years ago, he said, invest in children, the well-being of children. And then he made a statement which really resonates with me, and you can contemporize this language. But he said that he hoped that children would grow up trusting in its institutions and its security and trust in the well-being of society. That was his vision in 1930. And if you reflect on that today, trust in your institutions and the security by which we owe young people. This is something that we resonate with at the Kellogg Foundation every day. We think about how can we create environments for children to thrive. So it came from our founder, and we continue to contemporize his language. He seems to have been very prescient in his wording, but we continue to build on his legacy and steward the resources as if he were here, and we want him to understand that we continue that legacy.
And I want to add to that. Being a Mississippian and being in New Orleans during this time, it's very important that the foundation's trustees and the leadership listen to the people on the ground. They literally came down from Battle Creek and toured, probably a week-long tour on a bus. They were some of the first people on the ground in the lower 9th Ward to actually see the devastation, the X's on the doors with the number of people found who were not alive and what the needs of the children were, and made investments based on what the community said they needed. And I think that, yes, don't do that. Yeah.
Tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Kelsey Roberts, and I'm from South Jersey. And thank you all. This has been wonderful, and the video was wonderful. Thank you. I guess I had two questions. One is, at the Kellogg Foundation, are you feeling any pushback or pressure under the current administration? And my second question is, on the ground, in terms of storytelling, can you tell us about any structured efforts to bring people together to talk about the trauma of what they went through during Katrina?
During Katrina, okay, you can talk about New Orleans and the work that we're doing in Katrina. But to your first question, yes, the entire nonprofit sector is challenged now. But what I can tell you is the collaboration that's happening in that space, the solidarity that's showing up, the push toward narrative in this time to explain what we do and why we do it is very active. And we are very hopeful that this work will continue. We are holding each other up where there may be a place for challenge. People are stepping in. So I see a very vibrant sector that is working extremely hard in these times to make sure that we continue to fulfill our purpose and our missions, and that is to create a safety net for our nation and the world so that all people have very successful outcomes, and we're continuing to do that work. And New Orleans.
Yeah, and I'll just add, several of the people that in organizations that you saw featured in the documentary are organizations and people that we continue to fund. Many of them were funded at the initial, in their initial recovery process, and they're continuing to receive funding. And we are doing celebrations, commemorations of Katrina 20 in both New Orleans and on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Actually, in a week from now, we will, our whole team will be there honoring those sheroes and heroes, and they will be viewing the documentary as well.
Tell us your name and where you're from. Are you good?
My name is Patrick Dugan. I'm about almost 30 years ago, I completed Group 13 of Kellogg National Fellowship Program.
Wow.
So I'm excited to see you here.
We see fellows everywhere.
I have been in the space of community development for at different levels for the past 30 years. And I kind of envision community development as a form of resistance. So I'm curious to know, and a lot of people today are trying to figure out, well, what should we be doing? And they say, well, maybe we should go to the streets. Maybe I should run for office. And that's not everybody's vocation. So what parallels out of the traumatic experience of Katrina might you see that could apply to the trauma and madness that is happening today in the multiple New Orleans? Every poor city in the country is experiencing not a hurricane, but the systems are not working they haven't worked for generations, and they're breaking down altogether now. So what are there any lessons? Because I know we got the issues.
Yes.
But what strategies, thinking, programs do you see out there that people might think about as we deal with this time today?
The first thing I'll say, and I'm not trying to plug the book, but in the book, I added conversation guides, toolkits, ways for every one of us to take action in this moment and to build this type of dialogue and truth-telling and community collaboration in our own communities. And for that matter, in our own homes, if it's not there. But it's a process, and healing is a journey that we all need to take. And you can take it individually and personally, but you can also lead a community in this space as well. One of the things that we have funded is what we call truth racial healing and transformation efforts. And again, the structure for that is documented, that any community can take and begin to replicate. And what it does is it gives you a structure by which you can bring people together across sectors, across leadership levels, and begin to have a dialogue around what do we need to transform in our community. And communities are doing this work all across the nation, and that's one thing about, narrative. I wish we were telling more stories about transformation that's happening on the ground throughout our nation as opposed to the sound bites about destruction and division. But it's happening, and we do have tools and recommendations for people to take action.
I know you, but why don't you tell the people your name and where you're from?
Caroline Hunter from New Orleans, Louisiana.
All right.
7th Ward, Circle Food Store. Graduate of Xavier University. And we're celebrating our 100th year this year, and yesterday screened the film on Dr. Francis and his pivotal role in bringing Xavier back in 6 months and helping change New Orleans. And I'd be curious as to what the role of the universities are in the recovery plan. Thank you.
I'm so excited that you're here. And Dr. Francis was one of the people on the bus talking to the trustees and the VPs about what to do, what was next. So he played a major role in that. We have several grants with HBCUs in New Orleans and in Jackson and in Mississippi to help move our communities forward around all the issues that we work on, whether it's early childhood education, family economic security, health equity, racial equity. All those things are part of what we fund at HBCUs in both New Orleans and Mississippi. And thank you for your question.
I think we have time for one more question. Sir, tell them your name and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Dennis Jean-Jacques from Greenwich, Connecticut. I just want to say welcome Kellogg Foundation to the island. I just want to mention that I run a black-owned firm in Connecticut, and the Kellogg Foundation was one of the first institutional investors to step in to help us build our firm, so I just want to say thank you. I know that we haven't formally met, but I've met several of your colleagues and things of that nature over the years. So my question is, we haven't talked about AI, and AI is something that's obviously very powerful and really changing the game. A lot of people don't realize that AI is really a physical phenomenon. It's a physical force. A lot of cities and companies and countries need land. They need cable wires. They need copper wires. They need power. They need infrastructure. They need chips. And a lot of those opportunities we're seeing it in the South. And whether it's clean energy, whether it's coal, there's going to be a strong movement. And as countries and cities look for compute sovereignty, what are you guys doing in terms of helping our people prepare for this onslaught that's coming?
You'll see it in the full documentary. There's a place called Turkey Creek in Mississippi where the community there fought back against all this encroachment. You're talking about the amount of power it takes to generate that AI answer, that ChatGPT answer, and they're situating these places, these facilities in communities that don't need that and won't benefit from it. In Turkey Creek, they're not pushing back against that. What they've been able to do is get 200 acres of land preserved. And so communities now could start thinking, again, I'm not a policymaker, I'm just a journalist telling stories, but what we see in a place like Turkey Creek is what they're doing is they're getting ahead of the encroachment by locking in some preservation. And so if communities are concerned, because it's very dirty technology, right? The amount of water it takes and the amount of energy it takes is very destructive, right? And so what we're seeing, at least in Mississippi, is like they're getting ahead of the curve and preserving land to at least create a buffer around themselves. They're trying to.
And I would say we're learning a lot in this space, and there is a lot more to learn. AI can be a very powerful tool. It can be a leapfrog strategy for some of the issues we're dealing with. I recently learned that there are places where they're deploying AI and not only making up the education gap that children lost because of COVID, the 2 years, but advancing them several years by utilizing AI as that accelerator. So what we're doing is we're trying to understand where is the AI for good, how do we prepare people for these opportunities as we continue to think about building stable families so that they can provide security for young children. But we also know that there are challenges ahead as well. And we're trying to understand where there may be a strategy that will allow us to understand these challenges better and get in front of them. If there is a job replacement strategy that we need to understand, we need to understand that so we can know how to prepare people for the future. So it's constant work that we're continuing to do. We try to learn as much as we can in these moments of disruption. I say in some ways it's disruption, but we have to get out in front of that, and that's work that we have to continue to do.
Tremaine, where can folks see the documentary again?
On August 22nd, it will be on Peacock, starting August 22nd on Peacock.
We want to thank our panel. This has just been a great conversation on behalf of the Union Chapel Education and Cultural Institute. My name is Karen Holmes Ward. We want to thank all of you for being here today. We want to thank the Kellogg Foundation for their support of this forum and our ongoing forum series throughout the summer. Make sure you check out our website, Union Chapel Education and Cultural Institute.org, for the rest of the forums. And we want to give Tremaine and Lejeune an opportunity to sign some books in the back, so you have a chance to chat with them one-on-one, and we'll also have their books available at the Cousin Rose Gallery across the street throughout the rest of the summer. We want to thank you very much for being here. Again, thanks to all of you.
Great, wonderful audience. This was great.
So line up in the back if you want to get your book signed.